You ever get that feeling in your gut, like something's happening right in front of you but you can't quite figure it out? Yeah, that's been me for the last few months. But I kept pushing it aside. My wife Amanda is 6 months pregnant with our first baby, and I thought the distance between us was normal. Maybe it was just the hormones or the exhaustion from carrying our child. I was an idiot. Last Friday was the night everything fell apart, and looking back now, I still can't understand how I didn't see it coming. I was supposed to be at a late work meeting that evening, or at least that's what Amanda thought. I actually finished earlier than expected, and I was excited to get home, maybe steal one of those rare moments where we could relax together and watch something stupid on TV. When I got home, the house was dark and felt empty, so I assumed she was upstairs taking a nap or something until I noticed her car wasn't in the driveway. I thought maybe she'd gone to the store. I texted her, but no reply. 30 minutes went by, then an hour, still no response, and her phone was going straight to voicemail. I'm not the type to get paranoid, but something about that silence was gnawing at me. That's when I did something I'd never done before. I opened her laptop. I felt guilty just looking at it, like I was crossing a boundary, but in that moment, I didn't care. The first thing that popped up was a group chat with her friends. They were talking about some party they'd all gone to, something I had no idea about. The messages were full of details, laughing about how wild the night had been. One of her friends wrote, "I thought I'd die when Amanda jumped into the pool. Pregnant and still the life of the party." Wait, what? A party? My pregnant wife went to a party without telling me. I was floored. She hadn't mentioned it at all, and as far as I knew, she'd spent the whole evening at home, resting. But here she was, out partying, jumping into pools, and who knows what else. I kept reading, and that's when things got worse. Her friend Megan wrote, "I still can't believe what happened with him. What was she thinking him? Who the hell was him?" My heart started pounding as I scrolled through the messages, piecing together bits of what had happened. A name popped up: Jason. I didn't know this guy, but apparently he'd gotten a little too close to Amanda that night. The chat was full of teasing comments and vague inside jokes that made my stomach turn. I didn't know what I had been expecting to find, but it sure wasn't this. Pregnant, partying, another guy. By now, I was pacing the living room, my thoughts spinning out of control. Where was she? What was she doing? And why hadn't she said anything to me? Another hour passed before I finally heard the front door creak open. It was nearly midnight. Amanda walked in, holding her heels in one hand and her phone in the other, with this smug little smile on her face, like she'd just had the best time. Seeing her hit me like a freight train: everything I'd read, everything I didn't know, and everything I was about to find out. But that confrontation, that was just the beginning. When Amanda came through the door, her mood was way too carefree for someone who had been out doing God knows what. She didn't even notice me at first, sitting there in the dark, watching her. She kicked off her shoes and stretched, letting out a long, satisfied sigh, like she'd just come back from a relaxing spa day. I stood up, trying to keep my voice calm. "Where were you?" She froze. That smile on her face vanished instantly, replaced by something colder, more calculated. Her eyes darted toward the stairs like she was already thinking about how to escape. "I went out with the girls," she said, her voice light, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Didn't you get my text?" That was her first mistake. There was no text. I knew it, and she knew it. I took a step closer, my heart hammering in my chest, trying to keep it together. "You didn't text me," I said, my voice steady. "In fact, I've been trying to reach you all night. Your phone went straight to voicemail." She stared at me for a moment, her face blank, then let out this light, fake laugh, the kind you give when you're trying to brush something off. "Oh yeah, my battery died," she shrugged. Holding up her phone like that was supposed to explain everything. I didn't even notice until I was already out. I nodded slowly, acting like I believed her excuse, but inside, I was seething. I couldn't stop thinking about those messages. I knew she was lying, but I needed her to keep talking, to keep digging her own grave. "Must have been a good time," I said, trying to sound casual. "Where'd you go?" Her eyes flicked away for just a second too long, and that's when I saw it, the hesitation, the pause before she gave her answer. "Oh, we just went to Megan's place," she said, forcing a smile and walking toward the kitchen like the conversation was over. "A few of us had dinner and hung out." Megan's. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her every move. That's funny, because I heard something about a party. She froze mid-step. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could get away with. Oh, well, yeah, she said, forcing another smile. It was more like a small get-together. You know how Megan is, she invites a few people, and it turns into something bigger. No big deal. I couldn't believe the lies coming out of her mouth. The anger was building in my chest, but I needed to push further. I wanted to see how far she would go with this. So, this guy Jason, I said, the name tasting bitter as it left my mouth, did he have fun at this small get-together too? Her reaction was instant. She spun around, eyes wide with shock, but quickly masked it with a laugh. Jason? What are you talking about? There was no Jason. You're being ridiculous, Adam. Am I? I snapped, my patience finally snapping. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Because according to your group chat, you were practically swimming with the guy. You didn't just go out with the girls. Amanda, you lied. You've been lying. The color drained from her face, and for a brief second, her mask slipped. But just as quickly she put it back on, this time angrier, more defensive. Oh, so you're snooping through my phone now, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You don't trust me. You're going to act like I'm the one in the wrong because I went to a party. The way she flipped it around, like I was the one who had crossed a line, made my blood boil. But that wasn't even the worst part. You were drunk, I said, stepping closer, my voice low with anger. Drunk and pregnant. What were you thinking? She scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was being unreasonable. Oh, please. I had one drink. One. Don't act like I was out partying all night. I stared at her, barely recognizing the person in front of me. The lies were unraveling, yet she clung to them as if they were the only thing keeping her afloat. She didn't care about the recklessness or selfishness of her actions. But I wasn't done. We're getting a DNA test tomorrow, I said, my voice cold and resolute. I need to know if the baby you're carrying is mine or Jason's. Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and fury flashing across her face. Are you serious right now? How dare you accuse me of that? You've completely lost it, Adam. This is insane. I let out a laugh, but it held no amusement. No, what's insane is how far you're willing to go to keep lying. But I'm done with this game. We're going for that test first thing in the morning. Amanda stood there, her face set in a hard expression, her jaw tight. The tension between us was thick enough to cut. I didn't know what she'd do next, but one thing was clear: the truth was starting to come out, whether she wanted it to or not. Amanda didn't move, frozen in place, staring at me like I had just accused her of the most outrageous thing possible. The worst part, there was no fear in her eyes, just pure anger. No guilt, no regret, just fury, as though I had no right to question her. You think I'm cheating on you, she spat, her voice sharp and cutting. I'm carrying your child, Adam, your child, and this is how you repay me. By throwing around wild accusations because I went to a party. I wasn't falling for it anymore. I crossed the room in 2 long strides, barely holding back the anger boiling inside me. It's not just the party, Amanda. It's everything: the lying, the sneaking around, the sudden nights out, your phone always on silent, your secret little world that I'm apparently not a part of. And you never mentioned this Jason guy. Why? She threw her hands up in frustration, pacing the room like she couldn't believe what was happening. There is no Jason, she yelled, her voice cracking slightly, but it sounded too rehearsed, too fast. God, Adam, he's just some guy who was there. I barely talked to him. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I took a deep breath, refusing to let her twist things and make me doubt what I already knew. Right, that's why your friends were laughing about it in the group chat, right? About you and him getting a little too close. So, what was it? Just harmless fun? Because that's not how it looks from where I'm standing. Amanda's face contorted in frustration, her eyes narrowing as though she were carefully calculating her next move. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off before she could spin more lies. You know what? I don't care what you say right now, I said, my voice low and firm. You've lied to me enough. Tomorrow we're getting the DNA test, and that's final. If I find out you've been lying about more than just Jason, I'm done. The silence that followed was suffocating. Amanda's face flushed, a mix of anger and shock. But I saw it just for a brief moment. Her mask slipped. There it was, a flicker of something she didn't want me to see. Guilt? Panic? I wasn't sure, but it was enough to tell me I wasn't crazy for doubting her. And then, in an instant, she switched gears. Tears streamed down her face as she burst into sobs, her hands covering her face as if she were broken. "You think I'd do that to you?" she cried between shaky breaths. "You think I'd cheat on you while I'm pregnant with your baby? What kind of person do you think I am? I'm your wife, Adam. How can you not trust me?" I stood there, watching her unravel. But something had shifted inside me. I'd seen this performance before: the tears, the deflection, making me out to be the villain. I had fallen for it time and time again, maybe even for years. But not this time. This time it wasn't working. I felt nothing but cold determination. When her sobs finally subsided, she sat on the couch, looking up at me with red, tear-filled eyes, searching my face for any sign of weakness. She was playing her last card, hoping I'd cave. But I didn't. "We'll see, Amanda," I said, my voice like stone. "We'll see after the test." She blinked, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground. For a second, I thought she might explode again, but instead, she straightened up and wiped her face with the back of her hand. The tears disappeared as quickly as they had come. "Fine," she said coldly, venom lacing her words. "If that's what it takes to prove to you that you're being paranoid, fine. I'll take the damn test." But she stood up and stormed past me, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I didn't follow. I just sat down, staring at the floor, my head spinning from everything that had just unfolded. The Amanda I had known, the woman I had married, she was slipping away, or maybe she had never really been there at all. I didn't know what to believe anymore. My thoughts kept going back to Jason and the way her friends had joked about it like it was no big deal. But there was nothing funny about this. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape, and no matter how much I wanted to believe her, the pieces just didn't fit. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking through the door, laughing, carefree, like nothing was wrong. The lies, the secrets, the fake tears, now the looming DNA test that could tear everything apart. Morning came, and when I dragged myself out of bed, Amanda was already up. She didn't say a word to me as she got dressed, but she didn't need to. We both knew what was coming next. This was the moment everything would change. The drive to the clinic was painfully silent. No music, no small talk, just tension so thick it was choking us both. But in that silence I knew one thing for sure: by the end of the day, I'd have the truth, one way or another. The clinic felt like a tomb, cold, sterile, and suffocating. We sat next to each other in the waiting room, but the space between us felt like miles. Amanda scrolled through her phone, avoiding my gaze, her face a perfect mask of indifference. I didn't know what was going through her head, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. All I wanted were answers. When the nurse called our names, Amanda got up without a word and marched toward the back like this whole thing was just another core. She needed to get it over with, but for me it felt like my entire world was hanging in the balance. The test itself was simple, just a swab and some paperwork, but that didn't stop my heart from pounding like a drum as I signed the final form. I glanced over at Amanda, who was already halfway out the door, like she couldn't get out of there fast enough. I followed her into the parking lot, the silence between us unbearable. We got into the car, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. My mind was swirling with 1,000 questions, but none of them mattered until the results came in. Finally, Amanda broke the silence. "This is ridiculous, Adam," she said, her voice icy, as if we were discussing something trivial like the weather. "You're going to feel like a complete fool when the results come back, and you realize this baby is yours." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. If I feel like a fool, at least I'll know the truth. She scoffed, shaking her head, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "You really don't get it, do you? You're ruining our marriage with this paranoia. You should be focusing on the future, on the baby. But no, you're too busy playing detective." Her words stung, but not in the way she intended. I could feel the heat of my anger rising, but I swallowed it down. The truth was, she wasn't even trying to defend herself anymore. Instead, she kept turning it around on me, making it seem like I was the one tearing us apart. But after all the lies and sneaking around, how could she expect me to act like everything was normal? I didn't respond. I couldn't trust myself to speak without losing it. So, I drove home in silence, my thoughts tangled in a mess of confusion. I replayed the night she came home from that party in my mind, the carefree smile, the smell of alcohol, and the way her friends joked about Jason, the guy who kept showing up in the background, even though Amanda claimed he was nobody. When we got home, Amanda didn't waste any time going upstairs. "I'm going to lie down," she muttered, barely glancing at me as she disappeared into the bedroom. She always did this, retreating whenever things got too real. I couldn't tell if it was fear, guilt, or simply indifference at this point. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, wondering what the hell I was doing. Part of me wanted to confront her again, demand the truth, make her admit what she'd done. But another part of me, maybe the smarter part, knew that no matter how much I pushed, she wouldn't crack. Amanda was too good at this game. So instead, I did something else. I went back to her laptop. I know I shouldn't have, but after everything, I couldn't let it go. I had to find out what else she was hiding. If she wasn't going to tell me, I was going to figure it out myself. This time, I wasn't looking for vague messages or hints. I needed something concrete, something that would either confirm my worst fears or give me a reason to trust her. I started with her emails. Nothing unusual there. Then I went back to the group chat, scrolling through older messages, piecing together the timeline. That's when I found it, a message buried deep in the chat from a few weeks ago, after another one of her nights out. Megan had texted her, "So, what's going on with Jason? Are you going to tell him?" Tell him what? Not. My heart started pounding again. I scrolled down to see Amanda's reply. "Not yet. He's too suspicious right now. I need to wait." Wait for what? What wasn't she telling me, or worse, what was she telling Jason? Before I could stop myself, I clicked through her recent photos. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe pictures from the party, maybe something innocent I could overanalyze. But what I found made my blood run cold. There were a few photos from that night. Amanda looked happy, carefree, but one picture stood out. It was her with Jason, arms around each other, grinning at the camera like they were having the time of their lives. In the background, someone was holding Amanda's shoes, and she had clearly just jumped into the pool pregnant, laughing, drunk, with another man's arm around her. I slammed the laptop shut, feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. It wasn't just the photo or the messages. It was everything, the lies, the manipulation, the way she made me doubt myself. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Amanda wasn't just deceiving me, she was playing both of us. I stood up, pacing the living room, trying to decide what to do. Confront her again? What good would that do? She'd just deny it, twist the story, cry, scream, anything to avoid admitting the truth. But what hit me the hardest, what gnawed at my insides, was the possibility that the baby she was carrying might not even be mine. In that moment, I realized something. I was done. Done waiting, done playing her games, done hoping for some miraculous redemption. The DNA test would give me the answers I needed, and once I had those results, everything would change. The house felt eerily quiet after I shut the laptop. That picture of her and Jason was burned into my mind, their smiles mocking me every time I blinked. I had all the proof I needed, but it still didn't feel real. There's a moment when you know your life is about to change forever, and you can never go back. I was standing on the edge, staring into the unknown. I wasn't ready to confront her, not without the DNA results in hand. But I wasn't going to sit back and let her keep pretending. My gut screamed at me to act, to tear away the facade and make her face the truth. That evening, Amanda came downstairs like nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted dinner, in that casual, almost robotic way she had adopted lately, like she was just going through the motions of being a wife. I stared at her, trying to remember the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I thought I'd be starting a family with. But all I saw now was a stranger, someone who had been lying to me for who knows how long. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sharp and steady. The words came out harder than I intended. She froze, her back to me as she stood at the counter, pretending to pour herself a glass of water. About what, she asked, not turning around, her voice carrying that defensive edge again, like she already knew where this was going and was bracing for it. "About Jason," I replied, the name hanging in the air between us like a ticking bomb. The glass in her hand clinked against the counter as she set it down, but she still didn't face me. "I already told you, Adam," she said slowly, carefully. "There's nothing going on with him. He's just some guy. You're making this into something it's not. I clenched my fists, trying to contain the wave of anger building inside me. Really? Because it didn't look like nothing in that picture I found. You two looked pretty cozy for just friends. Her shoulders stiffened, and she finally turned to face me, her eyes locking onto mine. But there was no surprise there, just cold, calculated control. You went through my laptop again, she snapped, her voice rising in frustration. God, Adam, how many times are we going to go over this? I can't believe you don't trust me enough to stop. I cut her off, my voice louder now. I was done with the charade. Just stop, Amanda. I've seen enough the lies, the sneaking around, the partying while you're pregnant. None of it adds up. You actually expect me to believe you've been completely innocent through all of this, after everything. Her expression hardened, but she didn't back down. What do you want me to say, Adam? That I'm sorry for going out with my friends. That I should have told you about Jason. She threw her hands up, pacing the kitchen like she was the one who'd been wronged. Fine, I should have told you, but I didn't cheat on you. Not that it matters, because you've already decided I'm the villain. I laughed bitterly, but there was no warmth in it. You did cheat on me, Amanda. Maybe not in the way you think, but you've been lying for months, hiding things, sneaking off. And now you want me to just sit here and believe that this baby is mine, without any doubt. Her eyes flared with anger, and for a moment, I thought I saw panic flash across her face, but she recovered quickly, her voice growing colder. You really think I'd be that stupid? That I'd let some random guy come between us while I'm pregnant? God, Adam, you're paranoid? This is all in your head. My hands shook as I felt my last bit of control slipping away. Then why are we waiting for a DNA test, Amanda? Why didn't you tell me about him from the start? If there's nothing going on, why hide it? Her silence said it all. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her lips pressed together as if she was holding back what she really wanted to say. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't going to admit anything. She was too deep into her web of lies to ever come clean. I leaned against the counter, staring at the floor, the weight of it all crashing down on me. I'm not doing this anymore, I muttered, more to myself than to her. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped, her voice sharp. I looked up, meeting her cold, angry eyes. It means this marriage is over, Amanda. Whether the baby is mine or not, I can't keep doing this. The lying, the manipulation, the constant gaslighting, I'm done. Her expression changed in an instant. The anger faded, replaced by something I hadn't seen in a long time, desperation. She stepped toward me, reaching out as if to close the distance between us, but I didn't move. Adam, wait. Don't do this, she pleaded, her voice softer now, almost trembling. We're having a baby. You can't just walk away. I shook my head, the exhaustion finally catching up to me. I can't stay, Amanda. Not like this. I'll be there for the baby if it's mine, but as for us, we're done. For the first time in months, Amanda didn't have a quick, biting response. She stood there, frozen, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes like she couldn't process what I was saying. For a brief second, I wondered if she'd finally drop the act, if she'd beg me to stay and try to fix things. But she didn't. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed upstairs without another word, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen amidst the wreckage of our marriage. That's when it hit me, no matter what the DNA test revealed, this relationship was already dead. The truth had been rotting between us for far too long, and there was no going back. The sound of her footsteps pounding up the stairs echoed through the house, each step a painful reminder of how far we had fallen. I stayed in the kitchen for what felt like hours, leaning against the counter, staring blankly at the spot where we had just argued. There was nothing left to say. She had retreated to the bedroom, as she always did, leaving me alone in the mess she'd made. And in the silence, something shifted inside me. The anger, the heartbreak, they were still there, but now they were joined by something new: clarity. I was done waiting for her to change, done hoping for a confession or even a shred of remorse. No matter what the DNA test said, I wasn't going to let her drag me down anymore. I made up my mind. I walked upstairs, the air heavy with the weight of finality. The door to the bedroom was shut, but I didn't care. I knocked once and pushed it open without waiting for a response. Amanda was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me, staring at the wall. She didn't even flinch when I entered. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. She didn't turn around. What do you mean? What happens next? Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. I mean, we need to figure out what to do while we wait for the results, I replied, leaning against the doorframe. I'm moving out. I can't stay here anymore. That got her attention. She turned around, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're what? The shock in her voice was real this time. She hadn't expected me to take it this far. Adam, you can't just walk away. We're about to have a baby. I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. You think I don't know that? But this US, we're broken, Amanda. We've been broken for a long time, and I can't keep pretending everything's fine. Not after everything that's happened. Her eyes narrowed, and just like that, the desperation vanished, replaced by the same cold, defensive mask she'd worn for months. So, you're just going to bail? Leave me to handle everything on my own? Real classy, Adam. I shook my head, refusing to take the bait. I'm not bailing. I'm giving her space. I'll be there for the baby if it's mine, but I can't stay in this house with you anymore. Not with all the lies, the secrets, the way you've been manipulating me. Amanda stood up, crossing the room until she was inches from me, her eyes blazing with fury. Manipulating you, she hissed. You've been paranoid and controlling for months, Adam. You're the one spying on me, invading my privacy. And now you're running away because you don't like what you found. I stayed quiet, letting her words wash over me. It was the same pattern every time she felt cornered. She flipped the script, making me out to be the villain. But this time I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. I stood my ground, my voice unwavering. I'm not running away, I said firmly. I'm protecting myself. And honestly, Amanda, maybe you should take a hard look at yourself and figure out why we're even here. She crossed her arms, glaring at me with all the anger she could summon. Don't you dare try to pin this all on me, she shot back. You're the one walking out. You're the one throwing away our family. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. Family, Amanda? You've been hiding things from me for months. You lied about that party, about Jason, and now you expect me to pretend nothing's wrong. That's not family, that's betrayal. For a brief moment, her face softened a flicker of something that could have been regret, or maybe the slightest crack in her tough exterior. But just as quickly, she shut it down, turned away, and walked over to the window. Fine, she said quietly, her back still turned to me. If that's what you want, then go. But don't come crawling back to me when you realize you've made a mistake. I watched her stand there, gazing out the window like none of this mattered, like everything we'd built together was meaningless. Maybe to her, it was. I didn't know anymore. I'll grab my stuff tomorrow, I said coldly. And I'll be in touch when the test results come in. She didn't answer, just stood there, as if she'd already decided this conversation was over. In a way, we both knew it was. I left the room, closing the door behind me with a sense of finality that reverberated through the house. This was it, the end of everything I thought we had. The end of a marriage that had been falling apart for far longer than I'd realized. That night, I slept on the couch, not even considering going back upstairs. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to be in the same space as her. My mind raced, torn between anger, sadness, and an unexpected feeling relief. As painful as this was, it felt like the first real step I'd taken in months. I was finally doing something for me, finally setting boundaries. The next morning, I packed a bag and left the house without saying goodbye. Amanda didn't come downstairs to stop me. I wasn't sure if I expected her to, but when she didn't, it only confirmed what I already knew. This was over. I found a place to stay with a friend, somewhere I could breathe without Amanda's presence hanging over me. Now, it was just a waiting game, waiting for those DNA results, waiting to find out if this baby was mine, waiting to see if I'd have to deal with her for the rest of my life, or if I could finally be free of her lies. But no matter what the test said, one thing was clear: I wasn't going back to her. That chapter of my life was closed. The waiting was unbearable. Every minute felt like it stretched on forever, like I was stuck in a cruel limbo, unable to move forward or backward. I had left Amanda, packed my things, and moved in with my friend Nick, but none of it felt real yet. It was like my life was on pause, all hanging on this one thing that could either destroy me or set me free: the DNA test. It weighed on me every second of every day. I tried to distract myself, throwing myself into work, hitting the gym, hanging out with Nick and his girlfriend, but no matter what, my mind kept circling back to the same question: was this baby mine? Nick was good about giving me space, but one night we sat down with a couple of beers, and he finally asked the question I'd been dreading. So, What if the baby's not yours? He asked, not looking at me, just staring at his bottle like he already knew how loaded the question was. I took a long drink, trying to delay answering, but there was no point avoiding it. I don't know, man, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Part of me hopes it's not. That way I can just walk away from her, but then, it's a kid, you know. I don't want to abandon my own child. Nick nodded, silent for a moment, before glancing over at me, his brow furrowed. And if it is yours? I sighed, leaning back on the couch and staring up at the ceiling. If it's mine, I'll take care of the baby. I won't stay with Amanda, though. That's done. But I can't abandon the kid. The words felt heavy as I spoke them, like I was bracing for something I wasn't ready for. I didn't want to be tied to Amanda forever. I didn't want her lies and manipulation to be a part of my life anymore. But if the child was mine, I couldn't just walk away. The next few days passed in a blur, a routine of waiting, overthinking, and trying not to let my emotions overwhelm me. I hadn't heard from Amanda since I left, and I didn't reach out either. There was no point. We both knew the test results would be the final answer. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed. I was sitting in Nick's kitchen, staring blankly at my coffee, when the notification popped up on my screen: test results, available. My stomach sank. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity before I could bring myself to unlock the phone. This was it, the moment that would determine everything: my future, my tie to Amanda, the child she was carrying. It all came down to this. With trembling hands, I clicked the link to view the results. The page loaded slowly, or maybe it just felt that way, because my heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. And then, there it was, 0% probability of paternity. I blinked, trying to process the words. My thoughts raced, my emotions a mess: relief, anger, shock, disbelief. The baby wasn't mine. The truth hit me like a tidal wave, sweeping away everything in its path. The child I'd been preparing myself to care for wasn't mine. Jason's face flashed in my mind, and suddenly, everything made sense. She had been lying to me from the beginning. All the excuses, the denials, the fake tears, it had all been part of her twisted game. She knew the baby wasn't mine, and she kept it from me, trying to trap me in this nightmare. I stood up, my legs shaky, anger surging through me like a fire. I wanted to scream, to break something, to rush over to Amanda's house and throw the truth in her face, demanding answers. How could she do this to me? How could she lie, knowing I was getting ready to be a father? I grabbed my phone, hands still shaking, and dialed her number. She picked up after a few rings, her voice cold, distant, like she hadn't expected to hear from me. What do you want? Adam. I took a deep breath, my voice low, barely keeping the anger in check. I got the results, Amanda. There was a pause on her end, but I could almost hear her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew. And she asked. You lied, I snapped, unable to hold back any longer. The baby isn't mine, is it, Amanda? You've known all along, haven't you? There was silence, and for a moment I thought she'd hung up. Then, she finally spoke, her voice cold and detached. I wasn't sure. I let out a harsh laugh, shaking my head. You've known, Amanda, you've known, and you let me believe it was mine. You made me think I was going to be a father when, all along, it was someone else's child, Jason's. Another pause, but this one felt different, as if she didn't care anymore. So what? You have your answer now. What do you want me to say, Adam? I made a mistake. It happened. Move on. Her words hit me like a punch, the complete absence of regret, the way she brushed it off like it was nothing, like I was nothing. It was too much, too heartless. A mistake, I repeated, my voice trembling. You lied to me, Amanda. You lied about everything, and now you expect me to just move on? Yes, she said, her voice still cold and emotionless. I do. What's done is done, and it's not like you're sticking around anyway. My grip tightened on the phone, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had never felt this furious, this betrayed. And in that moment, I knew I was done, not just with Amanda, but with the entire mess she had dragged me into. You're right, Amanda, I said, my voice hard. I'm not staying. You can go ahead and build your life with Jason. I want nothing to do with either of you. We're finished. Before she could say another word, I ended the call and threw the phone down on the table, my hands still shaking with anger. It was over finally, completely over. The relief was there, just beneath the surface, but it was buried under layers of betrayal, fury, and sorrow. I wasn't just walking away from a toxic marriage, I was leaving behind the future I thought was mine. But now I could finally start moving forward on my own terms. Amanda had burned everything to the ground, but I wasn't going to remain in the ashes. I was going to rebuild without her lies, without her manipulation. Hanging up the phone felt like cutting the last thread that connected me to Amanda. It was a strange, hollow feeling, as if I had thrown away everything I once thought my life would be. But at the same time, I felt lighter, free. Freedom, however, didn't come without scars. I sat there, staring at the phone, my mind spinning. All the plans we'd made, the nursery I'd started preparing for the baby, the future I believed was set, it all crumbled in an instant. Amanda's betrayal had wrecked me, but there was no going back now. No more illusions. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd reacted on the phone. No apology, no remorse. She didn't even care that she'd been caught. She was just done. The fact that she could treat something so monumental as a mere mistake to brush off left a bitter taste in my mouth. But the truth was, she had been like this for a long time, cold, manipulative, always turning things around to make me doubt myself. I had been living in a fog, thinking maybe things could get better, that we could somehow fix what was broken. But now, the fog had lifted, and I saw things clearly for the first time in months. I wasn't going to be a father, not to that child, and I wasn't going to waste another moment on Amanda. The next few days felt like small steps toward rebuilding myself. I stayed at Nick's place, not ready to return to my old life, but I started putting things in order. I cancelled everything that tied me to Amanda: bank accounts, bills, anything we had shared. There was no point holding on to anything. I needed a fresh start. One morning, Nick and I were sitting on his porch, drinking coffee. It was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that wasn't heavy. The air was crisp, that kind of September morning where you can feel that things are about to change, like a new season was coming. For the first time, I felt ready to embrace it. "How are you feeling?" Nick asked carefully, his tone curious but supportive. He'd been watching me for days, giving me space but also keeping me grounded. I took a deep breath, staring out at the street as the leaves began to change color. "Better," I admitted. "It's strange, you know. I thought I'd be more broken after all this, but I'm not. I'm angry, sure, but it's like I can breathe again." Nick nodded. "That's the thing about being in a toxic situation. You don't realize how much it's suffocating you until you get out." He was right. I had been suffocating for so long, trapped in Amanda's lies and manipulation, clinging to a relationship that had died long before I learned about Jason. But now, I had space, clarity, and with that came something unexpected. For the first time in months, I felt like I could move forward. The future I had imagined with Amanda was gone, but there was still a future for me, one that didn't involve her cruelty and deceit. I could rebuild. A few days later, I returned to the house for the last time. Nick came with me to help pack up the rest of my things. Walking into the house felt strange, this place that had been my home, where I thought I'd raise a child. Now, it was just an empty shell. The air felt thick with the memories of arguments, lies, and betrayal. But there was no sadness left, just a quiet determination. I packed up the last of my things: clothes, books, personal items I hadn't grabbed before. The nursery was still there, untouched since I'd started setting it up. I stood in the doorway for a moment, staring at the crib, the walls we'd painted, the stuffed animals I had bought, all for a child that wasn't mine. With a deep breath, I closed the door behind me. There was no need to linger, that chapter was over. As I loaded the last box into the car, Nick clapped me on the shoulder. "Ready for what's next?" he asked with his usual optimism. I smiled, the first real smile I'd had in a long time. "Yeah," I said, feeling the weight lift a little more. "I'm ready." Driving away from the house, I didn't look back. The life I'd built with Amanda was over, but I wasn't mourning it anymore. I focused on the road ahead, feeling a strange sense of freedom in the unknown. I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while I didn't need them. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild myself in ways I hadn't expected. I reconnected with old friends, dove into my work, and even began thinking about what I wanted for my future, not the one Amanda had mapped out for me, but one I could create for myself. And through it all, I realized something important. Something I never anticipated in the beginning was how the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the deepest. But when they reveal their true selves, you have to accept it. You can't stay in a relationship founded on lies, hoping it will change or improve. You have to leave, even when it's painful, because staying is what truly destroys you. If I could give advice to anyone dealing with what I've been through, it's this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't let anyone else define your value. And most importantly, don't fear letting go once you've discovered the truth. There's life on the other side, a better life. Amanda and Jason, they can have each other. I'm finished with that disaster. As for me, I'm moving forward. It's not easy, but it's necessary. For the first time in a long while, I can envision a future where I'm no longer trapped in someone else's deceit, a future that belongs to me. And that's everything.